While we all dislike failing, without a doubt, failure is an essential part of life. Most people agree that each failure equals a lesson, and without these lessons, there is no way to actually grow. Yet how many people really embrace this kind of attitude? How many people actually allow themselves to constantly fail in order to become better? And how can avoiding failure affect our martial arts training? Hi, my name is Rokas, and in this martial arts journey video, we will take a look at the lack of failure in traditional martial arts and how it affects our development. Before we begin though, I would like to define what I mean by saying traditional martial arts, as there are a number of possible interpretations to it, and discussing a subject while having different interpretations of the same term may lead to a lot of misunderstanding. I do not mean to say that I think other definitions to be wrong, but the one that I'm about to share with you proved to be the most efficient to me personally when debating traditional martial arts and trying to understand the whole subject. To me, traditional martial arts are martial arts which are heavily focused on tradition rather than practicality as its primary goal. While not always, this focus on tradition is often related to various cultural aspects. To give some examples, I'll ask some questions. Why do most Japanese martial arts schools teach to sit on the knees? Is it because it's the healthiest way to sit? Or is it because it's part of the Japanese culture? Why do Bujinkan, oftentimes referred to as ninjutsu, practitioners usually wear black gis? Is it because black is more practical for being less visible while training? Or is it rather because it alludes to ninjutsu practitioners on certain occasions in the past preferring to wear black to disguise themselves? How about defending from a Japanese sword? Is it very likely to be attacked by one these days? Or is it trained because it was more likely to happen in Japan 400 years ago? There's a story of Jigoro Kano, founder of judo, telling that he started decreasing the amount spent in newaza, grappling on the ground, because in his opinion, to quote him, humans are meant to walk, not crawl, which is actually a representation of the Japanese cultural mentality. This mentality was passed on from generation to generation even till today, as newaza in judo is more of a side than primary focus. Yet the question is it so because it's quote-unquote not practical or less important, or is it because it's part of the tradition that was passed on? On the other hand, the Gracie family started off training judo, which back then was still more commonly known as jiu-jitsu, yet Brazilians are infamous for not caring much for tradition or authority. They did not concern themselves with such beliefs as not crawling on the ground, and while they kept a few minor traditions, such as wearing the gi, which has practical aspects too by the way, they focused mostly on practicality and efficiency, which made Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu one of the most widely recognized effective martial arts today. Many more examples could be given, but as you may see, traditional martial arts tend to have a high emphasis on preserving tradition and sometimes even sacrificing practicality and efficiency to do so, oftentimes doing that even unknowingly. To summarize, one definition of traditional martial arts may be closely related to the heavy investment of a particular martial art into traditions such as Aikido, Bujinkan, Wing Chun, various styles of Kung Fu, Taekwondo, and more, versus other practices which are more focused on practicality such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, Muay Thai, boxing, and kickboxing. This is not to say that practices focused on efficiency do not have traditions or limitations, for example boxing focusing on striking and neglecting wrestling or kicking. Yet its investment into traditions is much less significant than that of traditional martial arts. It is also interesting to point out that the actual age of the martial art is not of the greatest significance here, defining whether it's traditional or not. As for example, Aikido, commonly referred to as a traditional martial art, is actually fairly young, officially established in 1942, compared to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is not referred to as a traditional martial art, has been developed around a similar time. Now with all of that in mind, having a single definition of traditional martial arts for this discussion, we may start looking at how lack of failure may affect a traditional martial arts practitioner. Due to its heavy focus on preserving tradition, you may notice that traditional martial arts oftentimes sacrifice practicality as a result, which leads to less pressure testing, such as by the means of live sparring. Even if it does include pressure testing, the pressure testing in traditional martial arts is often limited by cultural aspects, such as you have to stand in this particular stance and strike in this particular way, not because it is most effective, but because that is how it was taught 200 years ago. Or to give another example, because samurai used to wear armor which did not allow such movements. When the emphasis are highly focused on tradition, for a new student entering this type of martial arts school, there's usually an overwhelming amount of cultural things to learn, starting from ethical traditions, such as what words and when to say, where and how to bow and sit, how to address others, alongside all the other culturally influenced physical movement intricacies, which are a challenge not only in a motorical way, but also as a mental exercise to understand various particular, culturally influenced stances, techniques, and subtleties. In this beginning period, a new student oftentimes experiences a tremendous amount of failure, being humbled in front of others who already know the status quo and have mastered it. Yet after a while, if a new student perseveres and learns the ways of the school, a potential danger arises. One of the aspects of maintaining humility is understanding and knowing our limitations, which is oftentimes foreign by experiencing failure. As mentioned before, the humbling aspect of traditional martial arts have a tendency to be more evident in the beginning of the learning process, when trying to understand how and why things work in this particular school and failing to do so for a significant time. Yet since traditional martial arts tend to put less focus on practicality and pressure testing, instead emphasizing very specific details and particular learnable skill set, a new student after a while starts to learn them by heart, which leads one to experience failure less and less frequently, since he knows what and when to do exactly. Since pressure testing or live sparring is oftentimes missing in these schools, there's no more clear way to show the limitations of this student, once more starting to limit the amount of experienced failure dramatically. This growing lack of failure in a student potentially starts to build an unrealistic perception of one's own martial skills, as this person becomes recognized and respected amongst school members, being able to perform the specific techniques with cooperative partners on an excellent level, the way he or she is expected to, without having a real actual live challenge where someone by all means would try to make the practitioner fail, or where he and she inevitably would fail. Lacking this experience of constant failure, a potential sense of being unbeatable starts to develop in this student. This is the realm where there's a lot of potential for ego growth too. Give only compliments to a person you know for a month, and most likely you will start to see how they soon become overconfident. Keep telling the same person that he or she is bad, and most likely soon enough they will start to consider themselves a loser. This is simply how our psyche works. We oftentimes rely on others to define how we are. The best balance is where we receive a mix between a feeling of success and failure, where we see our progress, yet we are also forced to recognize our limitations and capacity to grow further. If we experience success unproportionately more frequently than failure, our minds start to naturally come to a conclusion that we have reached perfection and excellence, far greater than that of others who still fail. This idea gives a huge sense of I am better than others, which we oftentimes call having a big ego, because it's all about me. Unfortunately, the way many traditional martial arts are set up, giving a chance for a student to learn a specific, defined, and unchallengeable skill set without constantly needing to test it with a live resistance, where someone would try to make the practitioner fail by all means, without constantly failing, all of it easily creates the described conditions for an ego boost and unrealistic expectations. Maybe not in the first year, maybe not in the second year, and not to say that when a person progresses in a traditional martial art, he stops experiencing failure altogether, but by the time someone becomes a black belt in a traditional martial art, it is quite common to experience a great sense of ego in this person, due to his mastery of required skill set, knowledge, and oftentimes cherished hierarchy system, which leaves even less space to question and actually challenge a high-ranking person, unsurprisingly leading to the described results when you know how it all works. Not to say that no one has immunity for this boost of ego either. I've met some great traditional martial arts black belts, yet I've also personally engaged with and heard others sharing their experience of meeting a huge number of bloated egos in traditional martial arts. On the other hand, when I started engaging in more practical martial arts, I was surprised by the number of humble people I met. Again, not to say that there are no egos here either, yet the ratio was clearly different. When I experienced this difference, a natural question arose. How come it is so? The answer, in my opinion, lies on the same train of thought. Martial arts, which are focused on the practical aspect, tend to engage much more in constant, never-ending pressure testing, where both practitioners are highly committed to make each other fail in order to really develop efficiency in their technique, while not worrying if the tradition is so much as preserved. This way, you keep experiencing constant failure, from the first day you enter the school till forever. Because even when you're a high-ranking person, there's someone who ranks even higher than you, who has significantly more experience than you do, and you possess this knowledge not only theoretically, which would not be enough to authentically challenge you, but you experience that directly by being tapped out, kicked, or punched effectively by this higher-ranking student, which is a direct experience of your limitations, constantly reminding you that you will never be the best, and that you still have so much to learn even after 10, 20, or even 30 years of practice. This process makes sure to keep your ego in check. And while some high-ranking traditional martial artists may be heard saying that they know that they still are just a student and they'd have so much to learn, it is one thing to speak of it theoretically, and it is a whole another thing to have a constant, direct experience and reminder of it. This also clearly explains why a traditional martial artist who, after years of practicing his martial art, enters for the first time a practical martial arts school and decides to test his skills versus a boxer, wrestler, kickboxer, or other practitioner who is used to constant pressure testing. The traditional martial artist, under these circumstances, usually experience a huge blow to their ego, as much as 90% of what they learned for years fails completely under real pressure testing. He then usually leaves confused and hopefully humbled because their idea of reality and their skill set suddenly becomes leveled by direct experience of a tremendous amount of failing, oftentimes given by even a much less experienced practitioner of a practical martial art, which makes the lesson even that much more difficult. I hope that this description of lack of failure in traditional martial arts and how it potentially affects a practitioner's mentality will help both sides. Those in the practical martial arts realm trying to understand why and how sometimes traditional martial artists act, and especially those in the traditional martial arts world who've potentially gone for years without really challenging themselves anymore, without really testing their skill set and leaving the comfort zone, always finding an excuse not to do so. I encourage all of you to be sincere with yourselves and ask, why not challenge myself and try a live sparring with a practitioner of a generally acknowledged practical martial art? I know that they do not practice for the street, but again, what do you have to lose in testing yourself besides your ego? And if this message and suggestion makes you feel frustrated, I also advise to check yourself. Because if you feel frustrated, that probably means your ego and strongly developed and held onto limited beliefs are being threatened and challenged. Because if you would be 100% confident in what you do, why would this video and challenge threaten you? This was Rokas, and I wish you to own your journey.